YouTube? My name is Chad and I'm just some guy with a guitar. And today is when I'll be starting my series called Practical Music Theory for the Guitar Player. So we as guitarists, we are notoriously terrible about just wanting to play, just wanting to feel, and not really caring what's going on musically, even thinking that maybe understanding music theory is going to stifle our creativity. And I'm here to show you that yeah, you don't need to know every single thing they're going to teach in a classical conservatory, but there's some basic things in music theory that are really helpful to us as guitar players. And in this series, I'm going to progressively build on some elements that is going to help you become a better guitar player from knowing. Now, the first thing that we're going to talk about today is simply going to be how you can know every note on the fretboard. A big help, a big thing that really unlocks the fretboard for guitar players is being able to know what all the notes are. And so I'm not saying this is going to make you memorize all the notes, but what I am saying is this is going to help you be able to find any note. And that starts very simply with something you guys probably already know, which is what are the open strings? But you need to have these open strings memorized so that then you can figure out, well, where do they go from now as you count your way up the string. So if you don't know, we go from this low string right here, that's the E string. We go next to the A string, then to the D string, the G string, the B string, and the high E string. And you need to have those memorized if you don't already. That's half the battle right there. And now the only other thing that we need in order to figure out every note on the fretboard is we need to know the difference between a whole step and a half step. If we know whole steps and we know half steps, we can figure out anything else that we want to figure out as far as where notes are on the guitar. So I'm going to come up right here to the C note right here. A string, 3rd fret, and that's going to be a C. A half step is simply going to be the note that is 1 fret away on that same string. And so we're going to go from C here to C sharp here. And a whole step, well, you guessed it, it's only 2 frets away. So now we're going from C here to D here. And that's the way we name those notes too, is we have natural notes and we have accidental notes. Natural notes are like C and D that you just heard, where I have just a letter. And an accidental note is a note that has a sharp or a flat next to it. And so as you saw from this example, we have C, and then we go up 1 half step or 1 fret to C sharp, and that means it's one, so a sharp means it's 1 fret or 1 half step higher than the letter name. But that could also be called something else. It could be called a D flat. See, it's because a flat means it's 1 half step lower than, or 1 fret lower than the letter it says. So we have C, C sharp, but it can also be called D flat, and then D. So now then, what is it that we do with this kind of information right here? Well, once we know whole steps and half steps, we need to know how we can hear 2 notes and know if they're a whole step apart or a half step apart. And so there's a general rule, and then there's 2 exceptions to that rule. The general rule is that anytime you have a natural note that is moving to another natural note, in other words, we have like a C moving to a D, then that's going to be a whole step. And then if we have, and the same thing with accidentals, so if we have, say, C sharp moving to D sharp, that's also a whole step. And so our rule here is that if you have a natural note to a natural note, that's going to be a half step, or sorry, a whole step. And if you have an accidental note to another accidental note, that's going to also be a whole step. And of course, when I'm saying here, I'm talking about one letter name to the next letter name in the alphabet or in the musical scale. So that's our first rule. Natural to natural or accidental to accidental, that equals a whole step. But now our second rule is natural to accidental or accidental to natural is a half step. So that means if I have C to C sharp, so it had a natural note and then an accidental note, that's going to be a half step. So the same thing as I have, so let's call it D flat this time, D flat to D, that's an accidental to a natural. And so when it changes, that means it is a half step. So those are our two rules right here. And now we have two exceptions. So the rules are natural to natural or accidental to accidental. When it stays the same, that is a whole step. Or when it changes, when it has accidental to natural or natural to accidental, that is a half step. And now our two exceptions, we have the interval from, we have it right here, E to F, and our interval from B to C. Now according to our rule, that would say that that those should be whole steps because it's a natural note to a natural note. But B to C and E to F are actually half steps. And we see that on a piano. When you see those white keys, you usually have a black key in between. Typically you would have a white key to a black key would be a half step, and a white key to a white key would be a whole step. But every so often you find those keys where it's just two white keys together without a black key in between. Those are a half step, and that happens at B to C and at E to F. So we just have to remember that when we are finding what intervals we are working with here. So let's do a couple examples. If I were to say, what is the interval between A and B? Well, I might go here. Well, that is going to be natural to natural, so that's going to be a whole step. What if I were to say F sharp to G? Well, that's going to be an accidental to a natural, so I'm going to see that as a half step. And then let's go to one of our exceptions, B to C. Well, it's natural to natural, but it's the exception, so B to C. So what about then E to F sharp? Well, we have to know that because of the exception, we have E, so a natural to an accidental, but since we know that natural to natural in that case is a half step, that must be a whole step of E to E sharp. So know the rules, know the exception, and then what you can do is you can take those and apply it to those open strings that you know, and you can simply count. And so if I were to say, find me an A note on the low E string, literally all you would have to do is count your way up the neck in half steps, because we know that each fret is one half step higher than the one before. So let's do this. Let's count to A. So we have E. We'll go one step up. Now this is one of our exceptions. So one half step up from E is F. So first fret is F. Second fret is F sharp. Third fret, G. Fourth fret, G sharp. And fifth fret, A. So there we have it. If you have to find your A on the low E string, you just count up like that. Let's do one more example. We'll do one on the B string right here. So if I were to say, find me a, let's say, we'll find an A on the B string as well. We can go B. Here we go. There's another exception. C, C sharp, D, D sharp, or E flat. You can be using flats as well. E flat, E, F. There's that exception. F sharp, G, G sharp, A. And then you have it right there on the 10th fret of the B string. So I hope that helps you guys. The more you can understand what the open strings are and the difference between whole steps and half steps, the easier you can start to understand, okay, these are where these notes are on the fretboard. And as we continue in this series, you're going to see that we can then know, by knowing what notes we're playing, we can know what notes sound good over what chords, what good notes sound good together, work together in scales. And this is all going to give you tools in your arsenal that you might be able to use to be a better guitar player. That's what I got for you, YouTube. My name is Chad, and I'm a guy who plays guitar.